We have to know the road if we are going to travel back down it and dismantle the systems that lead us to trauma. Brené Brown. Dr. Brené Brown has a research career studying shame resilience. She's a professor at the University of Houston, and she has spent the last 2 decades studying courage, vulnerability, shame, and empathy. She often speaks about her research, including a very popular TED Talk, but she realized the way she presents her research to the world does not always resonate because she often uses herself and her stories as examples, and she has a very privileged white experience. One of Dr. Brown's friends, Tarana Burke, asked Dr. Brown, what would the Black experience be of shame resilience? What followed that question was a book known as You Are Your Best Thing. For me, You Are Your Best Thing allowed me to process my own shame, my own resilience in shame, my own vulnerability, my own empathy, but it also made me wonder, what would be the Black experience of test anxiety? Now, before we talk about the Black experience of test anxiety, let's define test anxiety generally. According to the American Psychological Association, test anxiety is a type of performance anxiety. It's defined as apprehension and fear of the consequences of being unable to perform a task, or of performing it at a level that will raise expectations of even better task achievement. Some symptoms of test anxiety include overarousal, which is sometimes called emotionality. Examples of this overarousal or emotionality include rapid breathing, a really fast heart rate, feeling dizziness, getting nausea, headaches, other things like that. Another experience could be maladaptive cognition, where a student can experience a lack of concentration, having negative or intrusive thoughts, as well as disorganized thinking. Now, these symptoms may sound pretty general and may sound like they could apply to a lot of different situations. You're not wrong. People who have generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, or adverse childhood experiences may all have similar symptoms to people who are experiencing test anxiety. Some strategies to treat test anxiety include studying efficiently, don't procrastinate, so don't put off studying, creating some type of a study routine where you do it in a familiar setting at a familiar time consistently, speaking with the teacher themselves, getting clarification of concepts you don't understand, etc., learning relaxation techniques, eating healthy, staying hydrated, exercising, sleep, addressing your own learning disabilities. For example, if you actually do have a learning disability, that could be the reason that you're not able to study effectively and you might be feeling anxiety about that. Or seeing a professional to talk about therapy, to talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, to talk about other things that can help you address your feelings of anxiety. Sometimes you can't manage it yourself and you need professional help. But what if you think failing is just gonna prove that Black people aren't good at science? What if how you perform on this test doesn't just reflect yourself, it also reflects an entire ethnic group, an entire population of people? What if your anxiety isn't because of your own performance? Although symptoms may be similar, you have to figure out the cause in order to treat it effectively. One thing that may add to the Black experience of test anxiety is something called stereotype threat. Stereotype threat is a fear of performing according to a specific stereotype. For example, in America, there's a stereotype that Black people are not good at math or science. Therefore, if a student who identifies as Black is preparing for an algebra exam, they may fear taking the exam because failing that exam might reinforce the stereotype. It might not have anything to do with how their parents are going to talk to them, what it means in terms of their grade. The fear may genuinely just be because of the stereotype that they know exists and how they identify. And if a student is experiencing this test anxiety because of the stereotype threat, you have to address the factors that led to the stereotype threat, as well as teaching a student how to reject the threat. That must be done before you can talk about eating healthy, staying hydrated, speaking to a teacher, because that is actually the root of the cause for the anxiety. It's not the performance itself. Implicit biases is another thing that can impact a student's experience of test anxiety. Implicit bias is a personal and sometimes unreasoned judgment that is present but is not consciously held or recognized. In other words, it's judging a book by its cover without even acknowledging that you're looking at a book. Our biases develop as a result of the stereotypes that we're exposed to, especially as children. So if we experience a stereotype of Black people aren't good at science or math, we may create an implicit bias where we also believe Black students aren't good in math or science, regardless of any evidence there. If a teacher develops this bias where they think a Black student is not going to perform as well on a math exam, that teacher might not even teach the student math as effectively or as in depth as they might teach it to other students who they think are more likely to understand the information. If that happens, the student might be set up to fail literally because they never learned the information. It has nothing to do with their own performance or how they're studying. The teacher didn't do the teacher's jobs because the teacher was biased before the student entered the room. You can't really do much about a teacher's bias in that situation, but acknowledging that a teacher has a bias can give a student the power to know it's not their fault. Education and knowledge really does provide power. Up until now, I've been talking about fear of failing an exam, but students can also fear consistent success or consistently succeeding on their exams because of what that means in terms of the expectations people have of them. Imposter phenomenon is when an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. Despite the fact that this person is consistently successful, they think every success is a fluke. They never think that they actually are worthy of the accomplishments that they have, and they consistently fear being found out that they are in fact a fraud and not really capable of doing the things that they've been proving themselves capable of doing. People are more likely to feel like an imposter in a setting where they are the minority. For example, a Black woman is more likely to experience imposter phenomenon in a STEM field than a white man. And you have to address the factors that make a person feel like they're an imposter in addition to their anxiety and their fear of testing. So you can't just talk to this student about their anxiety and about their testing. You also have to acknowledge the fact that this student might feel like an imposter and address how to make that student feel like less of an imposter in that situation to then feel capable of taking this test in the first place. Now, stereotype threat, implicit biases, and imposter syndrome are just 3 possible reasons Black students might experience test anxiety differently from the general audience when discussing test anxiety. This video isn't meant to answer all of the questions. It's meant to propose more questions. So, I invite you to ponder these questions and leave your responses in the comments. 1. What other things might impact a Black student's experience with test anxiety? 2. What has been your experience with test anxiety? 3. What strategies have helped you address your anxiety? 4. What strategies didn't help address your anxiety? And 5. What do you wish you could tell the person you were when you had test anxiety? And 5th, what do you wish you could tell the you who experienced test anxiety if you know what you know now? Thanks for watching.